Welcome everyone to our NCAA social series. I'm Andy Katz. This is episode number 32. We've been covering a number of topics throughout the course of this pandemic, a series that we're going to continue beyond the pandemic. Hopefully that will be sooner than later. And look, we've covered a number of different topics, from obviously COVID dominated to social justice to civic engagement. We cannot ignore there is a presidential and local election on November 3rd next week. And we have seen across all divisions that on Tuesday, November 3rd, that is going to be a day to engage, not to practice, to compete in any form on that day. We're going to talk about that with three impressive young people that are involved and have been involved in the NCAA as student athletes and now beyond. Ethan Good, in your lower left there, a former basketball player at Bowling Green University in Ohio. Caroline Lee, former soccer player from Southeastern Louisiana. Caroline has the privilege of being one of those rare people that has been on our social series multiple times, as she has been working in the medical field down in Louisiana, helping people deal with the after effects of COVID-19. And Justice Littrell, sporting his World Championship LA Dodgers jacket after the Dodgers won the World Series. Justice is a former football player at Northern Colorado. Now, all three are members of the SAC. What is SAC? S-A-A-C. And by the way, Caroline is also a voting member of the Division I Council. I'm going to go to you, Caroline, because you've got multiple hats here. First, let's go to a definition for those that are not familiar. What is SAC?
Absolutely. Thank you, Andy. SAC is the Student Athlete Advisory Committee, and we are a group that focuses on the well-being of our student athletes. We have a Division I SAC, a Division II SAC, and Division III, and we actually operate at multiple different levels. So you have campus level SAC, you have conference level SAC, and then we have national SAC. And so Ethan is our chair of national SAC, and Justice and I are both the vice co-chairs. And so we just basically operate to ensure that our student athletes are safe, that they're healthy. We do a lot of community engagement and preparing for life after college, life after sports. So, yeah.
So this is what drives me crazy in covering athletics for, I have to say, actually before some of you were born probably, but it's been a while. And it drives me crazy that people don't understand like how it works and how engaged student athletes are. And this is a perfect example. You know, I'm not saying that student athletes always have a voice, but they do have a voice. They may not have it all the time, but it exists. And Ethan and Justice, and start with you, Ethan, about when you realized that there was a forum for this voice to actually contribute to the conversation and hopefully affect change in a positive way in some form or fashion up and down divisions. When did you realize that it was available?
Yeah, my beginning with SAC is probably like many people, in which case I was voluntold to start attending the SAC meetings and see what was going on, figuring out about what the organization was. Historically, SAC has been a volunteer-based organization where you just kind of mobilize student athletes to give back and get involved in civic engagement and in their community. Throughout my time and to the higher levels that I've gotten in it, I began to see that there was much more of a platform for student athletes like myself, not the leading scorer on the basketball team, not the guy that was going to go to the NBA draft, but just a student athlete who was genuinely concerned about his peers and the mental health or any issues that they face. Towards my sophomore and junior year, I got involved in my conference SAC and was given the opportunity to be chair of that SAC. Once I got there, the Mid-American Conference, shameless plug here, is one of the better conferences, I'll say. No hate to Carolina Justice's conferences or anybody else's conferences. But at putting the student athlete voice first, our SAC organization at the conference level is within the structure of the conference government so that we have a voting voice within our conference. And you know, ever since then, I had the opportunity to be a part of the NCAA for the Division I SAC, and it's been extremely encouraging to see the opportunity and the platform and just the change that can actually be made, you know, just from some random kid from Ohio. So.
What about for you, Justice?
Yeah, so mine actually isn't the conventional route of getting involved in SAC. Like Ethan, I was voluntold by a senior when I was a freshman to come to a SAC meeting. But what hooked me in SAC was a SAC skit that we do for our athletics banquet at Northern Colorado. And I got voluntold to be a part of this SAC skit in front of our entire student athlete body. And I just kind of fell in love with how much student athletes can care and be a part of a group. I love that I get to go out and meet members from other teams. And in college athletics, a lot of the times, especially in football, I'm around the same 100 dudes every single day, all day long. So getting to interact with other sport teams and other individuals is my favorite part of it. It's one of the reasons why I love being in institutional, conference, and national SAC. So,
you know, Caroline, this can be a launching pad for so many different organizations that any one of you individuals could ultimately be a part of, you know, later in life as a professional. And so often I think we think with student athletes, okay, their club, if you will, on campus is their team. And maybe they have another outside interest. Maybe they sing, maybe they play the piano, maybe they're in a frat or a sorority. But how much do you think at a sort of granular level, being involved in a national organization that actually affects everyone within the NCAA ultimately can help these student athletes as they go on to be professionals in whatever they so choose?
Yeah, so just SAC in general, I think is a huge blessing for all of our student athletes because there's a lot of leadership development that comes with it, as well as professional development. So of course, you know, for Ethan and Justice and myself, being a national SAC and sitting on things like Division I Council and different subcommittees within the NCAA has really helped us, you know, developed our professional development skills and prepare for our futures and learn how to speak in front of a crowd and just overall shape us as people going into the workforce and being leaders wherever we are. And so I think the awesome part about the national level is you kind of get to see it holistically and you get to see the trickle down of leadership as well. And to me, that's been a really developing thing.
So look, I don't want to sugarcoat that. Obviously, sometimes there can be frustration. You know, decisions are made above you. So, you know, Ethan and Justice, I mean, how often have you felt like, as much as this is set up for you, that your voice is being heard?
You know, I think in previous years, this is an issue that's been worse than it is now. Since Division I SAC has been receiving a vote in Division I Council and really been forefront of leadership. A lot of people don't see athletes as the leaders in the NCAA, but I promise you, when Caroline or myself or any student athlete speaks in front of the Division I Council, they're listening, and their decisions are based upon our opinions. You know, it's said many times, if it wasn't for student athletes, these administrators would not have a job. And so I think it's very wise of them that in recent years they've listened to us, and a lot of the decisions made in that room come straight from us. So I wouldn't say this is an issue as of now. Obviously, there's a lot of student athletes and a lot of different opinions, so not every opinion is met, and there are some upset people. But for the majority, I would like to think that we represent the student athlete opinion very well.
Yeah, Justin, if I may add at all, one thing that, you know, I was always told by my parents was don't be a problem finder, be a problem solver. And, you know, in today's society, there's plenty of problems that can be seen. There's plenty of issues that can be identified. But what I've been really impressed with this group is, without even saying it ourselves, our focus has been to look for solutions to problems, whether things go our way, whether they don't go our way. Our goal is to do the best that we can with what we have, and to focus optimistically on what can happen in the future and what changes can be made. So that's one thing that's really impressed me with this group.
Well, I'll tell you the other thing too, to me, and I've been using this a lot in the last couple of months since the documentary came out, the late great John Lewis, the former congressman, civil rights icon. You know, you always, when you can, create some good trouble. And there are plenty of issues for student athletes that can be good trouble. And that always is within guardrails and peaceful protesting and challenging authority within the realms of society here. And obviously you can get things done. And Caroline, you know, this year is like any other in all of our lifetimes, regardless of age. I mean, we're dealing with a once in a century pandemic. There's social injustice Obviously, systemic racism for decades has not gone anywhere, and now some mainstream people are finally recognizing it. But I also feel like at the athlete level that we're seeing athletes' voice being empowered by the coaches. We've talked about that on this social series, that I think in years past, to Justice's point, you might have some players that say want to speak out on whatever issue it is through this forum or another, or just standing out on the street and protesting something. And the coach be like, hey, don't cause trouble, stay within our team concept. Within reason, I think that's all at the door now. That's being empowered, encouraged. How much have you seen that over the last couple months, even through these meetings that you're all having virtually?
Yeah, I think just we see now more than ever, there's so much power in the student athlete voice and in the young person voice in general, right? And, we're the future of our country, and we're the future of college athletics. And so I think more than ever, young people are feeling the courage to speak up, and knowing that, just because we're not as old as some people are that are in leadership or might not have as many years of experience, that doesn't downplay what we feel and what we believe in and what we want to stand for. And so I think that's a wonderful thing about athletics, is it also gives us a platform to stand up for what we believe in and to try to make a difference. And so I think this is kind of how civic engagement became a priority for SAC, and why we felt so strongly about pushing to have an off day on election day.
Before we get to that, Justice, I want you to add on that, and maybe how you viewed how coaches maybe have changed their attitude.
Yeah, definitely. I'm come from a place in Colorado Springs, Colorado, where speaking up isn't a hard thing to do. It's encouraged, but in some places in this country, it's not. Coaches aren't always going to be the ones to say, hey, speak your mind. Like you said, there's a lot of coaches out there that are strictly play by the book. You're an athlete, shut up and dribble. That's what it is for a lot of coaches. But you've seen that get absolutely obliterated in social media. Coaches are getting, fined and fired and all these things for not being open. And I think coaches are realizing, wait, hold on, let's take a step back. Maybe this isn't the way we should go about this. And I think it's opening up a lot of opportunities for student athletes. I think if you look at SAC or any student athlete organization across the country right now, we're steadily increasing participation, how much voice we have, just because coaches, the leaders of our teams, whether they believe it or not, are the ones that are allowing us to go forward and do these type of activities.
So, Ethan, let's dive into Election Day. This was a tremendous effort, in large part led by Eric Reveneau, a Georgia Tech assistant coach with the men's basketball program. Eric's a former Stanford assistant, head coach at Portland. And, he really did help push the NABC getting on board, which is National Association of Basketball Coaches, and then ultimately all members of the NCAA to make this, I don't want to say a holiday. I really think it should be a national holiday, but just, a day off, but not a day off to have a barbecue, but to be engaged. And it's not necessarily about just voting, because as we're seeing, a lot of athletes obviously have to vote absentee because they're not from where they're competing and going to school, but also engaging on that day, which is being a part of and maybe even just watching what unfolds over the course of the day, but being engaged also not just at the presidential level, but every level of the election. Because as we've seen over the last 6 months, whether it's racial inequality, that all elections matter, whether it's a sheriff, a judge, an attorney general, a mayor, all these elections matter, not just the ones that dominate the headlines. So from your vantage point, and then this group's organizational vantage point about this becoming a day off to engage, what was your reaction as that movement was going along over the last couple of months?
Yeah. If I may expand it even a little bit longer, over the last 4 or 5 years, we've really seen an increased awareness in social justice issues and reform. Whether it started with Colin Kaepernick taking a knee, or whether it started before that, a lot of people have now, through sport, become more aware of the issues that are going on in our country. And I think a lot of our focus, and I think Coach Reveneau has done a phenomenal job of pushing this. I feel like I'm tagged in a tweet every other day by him. It's absolutely impressive that he would be doing something with that much vigor and that much determination. But it goes from one step of awareness and then the next step of making an actual difference and making a change. For us, many of the conferences had already accepted this idea as initiative, something that they were going to do this year, that was going to, be a really great thing. But as a Division I SAC and as a SAC and as student athletes in general, the people that we represent, we thought that this isn't just a one-year thing. It's not just the presidential election. It's the elections that you talk about, the sheriffs, the mayors, whatever that may be. And it's something that happens every year, every 2 years, every 3 years, every 4 years. And it is simply a reminder that your time as a student athlete may be only limited to 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, but your time as a citizen, your time as a person in a community is your entire lifetime. And being reminded that, things are much bigger and that you can make a change, that when you use the rights that you're given, voting for officials or whatever that may be, it's important to educate yourselves and to take that action.
And I would add, and Justice, I want you to chime in here, is what we don't know is how long it's going to take to vote. Obviously, we're seeing incredibly long lines here in early voting, but on election day, for those student athletes that do have to vote in that particular city, or maybe they can vote, I should say, in that city, what if it takes them hours to vote, and something like, well, wait a minute, I got to get to practice at 2 o'clock, or I got to get to this or that, training meal or weight lift. Oh, I can't stand in this line. I don't have time. You take that off, okay? And for the coaches, and I don't want to slam coaches here, but for those, and I've seen some of this on social media that don't get it as to why this would be a day off, and it's not a day off to just fool around, that is one of the reasons. You can't predict how long it will take to actually vote for those that have to vote. Justice, your reaction to some of these, people that maybe don't understand why this should be a day of engagement.
Right, absolutely. And I think to start this off, it is called Civic Engagement Day Off, not Election Day Off, because we're not just going out and voting. While standing in 4-hour-long lines is going to be a problem for some student athletes who are in their hometown and not, absentee voting, but it is a focus for us was going out and helping the community vote, because those lines are still going to be there whether we're voting or not. So standing in line, handing out water bottles, making sure old people have rides to the voting centers, doing whatever we can as leaders in our community, because that's what we are. If there's a headline, student athletes are the one that are always in the front of the newspaper. We just attract attention, whether we like it or not. And so if we can go out in our community and use our platforms, like Caroline was talking about, and really help our community, propel our community further, that's what this day is for. And I love the idea of it. And I think a lot of our student athletes do. Coaches, maybe not. We get a practice off. They don't get a day to prepare. But so does the team you're playing that week. So coaches need to get it in their heads that this is not just for our safety, or not for our safety, but for our benefit, but for theirs too. We're all going out and voting. Historically, we all know that youth has not done a great job of voting. So this is what we're trying to change. We're trying to make a change right now. And this day helps, for sure.
First of all, I love what you pointed out there, because obviously it's not going to be a normal year. And driving people to polls is not going to happen this particular year. But to Ethan's point, this is an annual thing, and we will get to that point where someone may need a ride. Plenty of people will need rides to get to the polls, to exercise their right, a right that people have died for. And so I love that engagement aspect. And to your point also about volunteering, I mean, these are all positive things. This is the absolute opposite of voter intimidation. This is actually helping a democratic process. Caroline, from your vantage point, what was the reception that you heard, you're on the council as well, of making this an engagement day across all divisions?
I think most people really loved that idea and generally supported it. And I mean, we can never ask anything more than of our student athletes to be engaged and to be involved. And, kind of going off of something that Justice said, after we've all seen the statistics regarding young voters and the lack of participation in prior elections, we knew we had to do something about it. And we felt like it was our responsibility to make a way to ensure that our student athletes had the fundamental opportunity to express, you know, their right and privilege to vote. And I think on top of that, we're also giving them, you know, a day to also research what's going on, to be engaged in the community, to volunteer. It's more than just going to the polls. And so I think in general, you know, most people are aware of the statistics regarding young voters. And I think most people were very supportive of just giving us all an opportunity to go out and to be engaged in our community, and especially our athletes, kind of like Justice also mentioned, you know, whether an athlete does something right, wrong, or indifferent, it's front of the headline. So most people I feel like that I came in contact with, you know, of course on the council and in the association, and most people within athletics were very receptive and very supportive and loved the idea of giving the student athletes opportunity to be civically engaged.
Ethan, you know, if you can add that, you know, one thing, and like I said, I don't want this to be political, but like, I just don't ever see how voting is a bad thing. You want more people to vote, to be engaged, regardless of where they fall on who they're going to vote for. You want everyone to participate in this democratic process. When you were going through this, and you're in Ohio, I mean, did you, you know, at Bowling Green, did you hear anything negative about wanting more people to vote?
Yeah, well, actually, right now I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, so I'll be sending in my absentee ballot, and we're covered in that sense. But I was part of my freshman year, part of the 2016 election, and a lot of these same conversations were occurring, saying, you know, go vote. Our coaches were encouraging us to go vote. Never before has it been so widespread, whether it be watching the NBA on TV or just logging on to a social media app, reminding you to go vote, to register to vote, to do all these things. But no, as far as, you know, negative feedback in general, no. I think going and voting is the first step to becoming a more educated citizen, realizing that, you know, politics aren't just for the older people, aren't just for the smarter people, aren't just for the whatever. Knowing the issues that are in front of us, knowing the laws and the things that are in place, it's part of being a citizen, and that's a focus we're trying to emphasize.
So, Justice, a lot is changing in the student athlete world. We talked last week with Grace Calhoun, the Division I chair of the council there, about you know, potential legislation coming up on NIL, transfer policy. So a lot of things are happening where student athletes are going to need to have their voice involved, and it's going to affect them at all levels. What's next on the SAA, the SAAC, the SAC agenda coming up?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head. Obviously, NIL legislation is at our forefront right now, but also what's going to happen with winter and spring sport athletes as far as their upcoming seasons. Obviously, a lot of athletes' seasons are, you know, either canceled or postponed or altered in some way. I think most athletes can say that that's true. So what happens to our eligibility? Is our clock going to get extended? Are we going to get a season back? What happens there? That's something huge coming up, and something that the council is going to have to talk about in our next meeting. And then NIL, can you guys think of anything else that we have coming up? I know there's always something coming up ahead, always in the NCAA. We're always facing new challenges. There's never a day off.
It's going to be big.
What'd you say?
Transfer issue will certainly be big.
Yes. Of course, that's something that we don't really consider as coming up because we're always in it. I think since I've been in SAC, since I've been a freshman, we've been talking about the transfer landscape. So we're always talking about that. That's not new news or old news. That's continued news.
All right. So one last topic before we wrap up here, and I want to go back to Caroline because as I mentioned at the top, a two-time member of our social series team here. But look, you were dealing with and still are dealing with serious issues in terms of helping people through COVID-19 down in Louisiana. But there's a mental health aspect that we've talked about a lot here on this series related to COVID. We're seeing this all the time. The latest in the news, you know, Wisconsin had to cancel a game against Nebraska. Starting quarterback out with COVID. Head coach has COVID. They're down for at least 7 days, maybe 2 weeks. You know, just after they had their first game and they win it, they got all this momentum and then bam, shut down. Marquette getting ready for the season. Coincidentally, two teams in the state of Wisconsin. they're shut down for 14 days before they start going. So all these teams, this momentum, it's stop, start, stop, start. From a student athlete perspective, especially, and I've talked to some that have, have had to go through 7 days, 10 days, 14 days in a room, sort of feeling like they're imprisoned, during that quarantine or contact tracing related quarantine, that takes a toll on someone. What's going on in the SAC world to try to help those that are trying to navigate this unprecedented time?
Great question. And that's been a lot of our focus and area emphasis over the summer, especially kind of, a lot of seasons ended around March time when COVID first seemed to hit in our country, and there was a lot of unknown. A lot of seasons were ended. Nobody knew if we would have sports in the fall. Nobody knew what eligibility was going to look like. And so, that's been a really big push from us with SAC, is just, supporting one another and, understanding that this is a hard time for all student athletes, and there's still so much uncertainty, and whether or not you have to quarantine or not, what happens if your teammate contracts the virus. And so I think just the best thing we've been able to do is just kind of create like a web of support for our student athletes and let them know that they're not alone, and that these are all things that every, if not, most student athletes are dealing with. And so that's definitely been a big focus for us right now, just mental health and navigating through these uncertain times and through difficult seasons. But I think that a lot of our student athletes have, risen up and been positive and really taken advantage of this time just to, help one another and be a good teammate. And so for us as SAC, we've just been doing a lot of campaigns on social media and reaching out to groups and encouraging our conference SAC representatives and all of their campus SAC representatives and presidents just to, create a web of vulnerability and comfort and helping each other through these hard times.
So Ethan and Justice, I want you to comment on that as well. I'll start with you, Ethan.
Yeah, I think, as Caroline mentioned, even before COVID, our focus has really been on mental health, whether it was having conversations with athletic directors and commissioners about getting sports psychologists to be hired full-time at institutions, or whether it be, simply creating social media programming to try and make people feel better. Right now, we're doing the diversity and inclusion social media campaign that the NCAA is putting on, and the day one was My Story Matters. Getting these student athletes who are going through some tough stuff to be vulnerable and share those things, and hopefully, student athletes will be able to see that and say, I'm not alone. Although I may be physically alone, I may be physically alone in my room. We're together in spirit, and it's not forever. There's a bigger picture, there's a bigger goal in mind, and genuinely just that feeling of unifying athletes. We put out a unity pledge, we put out a unity logo. Hopefully that'll be on jerseys. Unity has really been the thing that we're trying to push during this time, and letting people they're not alone.
Justice?
Absolutely. So I don't know how much I can follow up after those two nailed pretty much everything. But I will say that through everything, SAC is going to be there. We're not giving up. We're not stopping. Training goes on. And we're always going to be there for our student athletes. So what our goal has been from the beginning. And we're going to continue to be there, continue to support our athletes, continue to encourage our teammates to be great teammates and help each other out. Because it's not just affecting one person in NCAA, it's all of us. So,
one last thing, I'll just follow up with you, Justice, and if anyone else wants to chime in. I just noticed this on this was on Wednesday. The Big East had their virtual media day, and they unveiled their uniforms. And on their uniforms, they're going to put BLM. And what's interesting is that it's not the NBA, it's not the WNBA. So you can't necessarily mandate what goes on a jersey across all divisions. But here's a conference doing something. And it's a conference not top down, because this was obviously an engagement with their student athletes that, wanted this, that felt comfortable and said, look, we want to say something about Black Lives Matter, and we're going to put it right here on our men's and women's basketball uniforms. And that, there's no way, I don't think that would have happened a year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. That's a sign of listening to student athletes and engaging with them and making them a part of, to your point, Justice, where everyone else sort of makes money and all that makes all this go. You're saying, look, here's a student athlete. We want to make you a part of this and listen to you. What do you think of that small token, but doing something that matters like that to student athletes?
Absolutely. That's bigger than a lot of people think, because it's not just for fans to show, it's for our athletes to feel. Our uniforms are part of us at some point, and we feel that. We put that on our jerseys, we put those patches on because they mean something to us. If it's a commemorative patch for a fallen teammate or a fallen coach or something, that means something to us, just as this BLM would. And to go along with that, I guarantee you also see the Unity Pledge that my guy Ethan Good worked really hard on and helped put out. The Unity Pledge and Unity Patch, that'll be on there as well, because Black lives do matter. All of our lives matter. We're all together. We're all in this together. Different shades don't define us. We're all doing this sports thing, this life thing. And so it means something to us to have that on there. It's not just for the fans to look and see and to have their opinions on. That's for us too.
Well, in last week's episode 31, we did cover the Unity Pledge, and I would direct everyone to watch that episode as well, with 3 other really impressive former student athletes that joined us for that. So look, all 3 of you doing wonderful things. Appreciate all that you're doing in terms of your leadership and your guidance. Justice Littrell, Ethan Good, and Caroline Lee. We'll see if Caroline can make it a repeat and come back for a 3rd episode, as she's now a regular here on our social series. And as always, you can go to ncaa.org/social series, where we've got all 32 of these episodes archived. Stay safe, everyone. We'll talk again next week after the election.